satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Does the president have any intention of pardoning him?
We've been asked that question multiple times. Our answer stands, which is no.
Yeah. Well, President Biden releasing this statement, quote, "From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word, even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice." Hunter also releasing a statement saying, "I have admitted and taken responsibility for my mistakes during the darkest days of my addiction. Mistakes that have been exploited to publicly humiliate and shame me and my family for political support. I will never take the clemency I have been given today for granted and will devote the life I have rebuilt to helping those who are still sick and suffering." President-elect Trump reacting on Truth Social, writing this: "Does the pardon given by Joe to Hunter include the January 6th hostages who have now been imprisoned for years, such as an abuse and miscarriage of justice?" Good comment from President Trump there. Liz Peek, your reaction.
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone in America is surprised that Joe Biden went back on his word to pardon Hunter Biden. But honestly, he did it in a way that I think really undermines the case that the Department of Justice is not political. I mean, he's saying, look, Hunter Biden was singled out, prosecuted for political reasons. We know, in fact, the opposite is true, Maria. They bent over backwards, the FBI and the DOJ, to let Hunter Biden get basically off scot-free from various things that he has done wrong. And obviously, a jury felt the same way. But I think Biden has inadvertently opened the door to Trump's argument that he has been prosecuted unfairly and that the DOJ indeed has been weaponized. That's his case. An awful lot of Americans think it's true. And we'll be talking about Kash Patel in a moment. But listen, that's the entire story about the DOJ and the FBI.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Totally agree. But what really gets me on this pardon is that this exonerates Hunter from everything.
Yeah.
Everything. Not just the federal gun charges, not just the drug charges, everything from 2014 to today, a 10-year period, even crimes he has yet to be charged with. Yeah. And we all know how we have reported so extensively on what the Oversight Committee has said Hunter and Joe have done, and that is money laundering and influence peddling. So that's gone. I mean, this pardon does not apply to Joe Biden, but Cheryl, you know that this basically wipes away everything from Joe as well.
And that was the initial question mark, was did Joe Biden do this for his son, or did Joe Biden do this for himself? And to be clear, even Democrats are criticizing President Biden's move on this. Not that pardons don't happen. You know, Bill Clinton, pardoned his brother Roger. Joe Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. But even Jared Polis on X wrote this. He said, "As a father, I certainly understand Joe Biden's desire to help his son. I'm disappointed he put his family ahead of the country." Greg Stanton, a Democrat from Arizona. "I respect Biden. He got this one wrong." He said this wasn't a politically motivated prosecution. Hunter committed felonies, and he was convicted by a jury of his peers. So, look, I mean, those charges, any average American that would have committed the gun charges, the tax charges, which were actually more serious than the gun charges because of the lying on the forms, any other American, Maria, would have been prosecuted even worse. Hunter still got that sweetheart deal in the beginning that was reversed. He finally goes in front of a jury, convicted, and Joe Biden says, nope. Not happening.
Well, I think Liz makes the right point, because this puts an underlining under what Trump has been saying for so long, that this government is so weaponized. I mean, for God's sakes, Donald Trump was indicted 89 times. This is so much BS. It's unbelievable. This is all politically motivated. Trump officially nominated Kash Patel for the director of FBI to replace Director Christopher Wray. And this is important because he has said for so many years he wants to clean up this weaponization. Now, I spoke with Kash Patel just last week on Sunday Morning Futures and asked him what it is going to take to make people trust these government agencies again. Can they be restored after all this weaponization that Biden and company put in place? Watch this.
exposure of corruption. Put out the documents, put out the evidence. We only have gotten halfway down the Russiagate hole. The people need to know that their FBI is restored by knowing full well what they did to unlawfully surveil them. The people need to know that there has been a de-weaponization, a defanging of the Department of Justice, and their houses of worship will no longer be raided. But they need to be shown the documents that said this was the reasoning they weaponized justice. And that, in my opinion, is how Congress can most importantly secure the trust or resecure the trust of these agencies and departments.
So we'll see, John Lonsky. I mean, those Russiagate fraudsters are still running around. No accountability there. We'll see if Kash Patel comes in, gets confirmed, and can clean this up.
You know, what's even worse is the fact that you had the FBI going ahead, running around and chasing people that disagreed with a woke agenda as it applied to education. And, you know, also the pro-life crowd. He was speaking about church members being followed by the FBI. That's ridiculous. So this politicalization of the FBI has to end immediately. We got to get politics out of justice. Otherwise, we're not going to have justice anymore.
Yeah, well, we'll see if this is a trigger for that now that everyone is obviously exposed and we're watching what Joe just did for Hunter.
Breaking right now, each day everybody is reminded directly or indirectly that we are in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, investors, in fact, reminded today, well, every time you peek in your portfolio, but particularly today, right? You look at the top performing names in today's session. At the top of the list, Salesforce.com is surging. Now, here's the thing. It's all about AI, you know, and just earlier this year, Salesforce.com, the stock got hammered because they were falling behind. They had no real AI vision that the street could see. Down at 1.16% on the year. Now it's up over 40% on the year. And I got to tell you, I continue to marvel at these managers that have sort of written off the notion of a fourth industrial revolution and the key components from AI to Bitcoin and the blockchain. I got to tell you something. I am a natural-born Luddite. I always tell people, if I was around when Ned Ludd was around, I would have been breaking up weaving machines too. But I know that these moments have several things in common. That ultimately humankind enjoys richer existence because of the driven visionaries. But it's never an easy transition, and it's never without controversy. Today, we have two of those visionaries with us that the world will be talking about 100 years from now. Sam Altman later on in this show, and Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy's executive chairman and Bitcoin evangelist, joins us now. Michael, it's so good to see you in the flesh, my man.
Here I am.
Here you are. So let's talk about this because there are three things I want to talk to you about in this interview. First, I want to talk about this MicroStrategy approach to buying Bitcoin because it's got Wall Street on fire. Some people are excited, some people aren't. So the strategy is essentially you're raising billions of dollars to buy Bitcoin. You have a convertible bond with arbitrage opportunities. Volatility is a financial engine. Usually volatility in this circumstance is a positive thing and also suitable for raising money in the future. So walk us through how does it really work?
Well, you've got one group of investors that want low volatility. They want a secure, comfortable ride. So we sell them a convertible bond. You've got other kinds of investors that want super high performance, the sports car. They're buying the equity. We borrow the money from the convertible bond market at 0% interest. We buy Bitcoin, we lever up the equity, so the equity outperforms Bitcoin, and that's great for equity investors. And for the bond investors, they can't stand the equity risk, they don't want the downside risk, but they have a huge appetite for the bonds.
Why do they have, you know, I saw one of the critics that said, you know, who the hell is buying these? Who's buying them? They said, why would anyone buy them? They have 0% interest.
Well, one group of people would be long Bitcoin investors. They're going to buy the bonds because they get the upside of Bitcoin without the downside. Another group of investors are convertible arbitragers. They actually buy the bond, short the stock, extract sort of a risk-free premium out of the instrument, and they can only do that with a convertible bond. They can't do it with equity, and they can't do it with Bitcoin.
So again, you face a lot of critics with all of this. What do you say to people who are saying, hey, you're making up financial terms? Like, you know, all the stuff you're kind of talking about is gobbledygook, and it's made up, and it's just sort of taking advantage of a moment in time when there's sort of a financial hysteria around the world, and it's not sustainable.
Well, I would say that public companies exist to issue securities. So some fixed income investors, they want a guaranteed coupon, or they want low risk, and they want to participate without the volatility. Others want to make an investment. If you want to invest in New York City, You can either buy the real estate or you can invest in a company that borrows a lot of money to develop 10 times as much real estate. So we're offering investors whatever degree of risk and performance they want. And there's hundreds of trillions of dollars in the capital market that absolutely has to buy a security, and they cannot buy the commodity.
Right.
So we're serving their need.
The volatility as a positive from your perspective, I think you called it or equated it to fire some earlier in the week. Explain that part of it.
Well, imagine I have a 40-ton weight in my backyard. It's a sculpture. That's US dollars on the balance sheet. Imagine I take the 40-ton weight and I put it on a flywheel and I spin it 60 RPM. That's a turbine. Now imagine I extend the arm a bit and I get it to go 120 RPM and I plug it into a power plant. Now I've got a reactor. And so what MicroStrategy is doing is we're tapping in that volatility. We're using $40 billion of capital to capture the energy. We're powering our equity forward, and we're benefiting the entire crypto economy and the conventional capital markets.
So, Michael, recently had a chance to address Microsoft to explain them the value of all of this Bitcoin. And you're obviously proud of yourself. We saw your video. I think what it takes, 17 takes. But I thought
21 times.
21 times, not
21
bad,
times.
not bad. I
Yeah.
think one time it took Earl Campbell like 59 times to do one commercial. I think it's a great opportunity, though, to borrow some of these slides to educate also the audience, because not everyone knows the benefits. So obviously I wanted to start with this because it dovetails into the whole conversation of the fourth industrial revolution, this technology wave, digital capital coming right after, of course, the personal computer down to AI. What distinguishes this, the digital capital?
Look, when we saw digital photos transform, a lot of people didn't get the fact that Kodak was going to get replaced by Instagram and Facebook, but they get digital photos. Digital capital is what happens when your long-term store of value goes from a building or goes from a portfolio of stocks to a digital asset like Bitcoin. Bitcoin represents the digital transformation of hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital in the world.
Right.
No one expected to see it, so they don't quite get
Right.
what it's going to be, except for the fact it's worth all the money in the world.
So let's talk about that, because you do have you have a couple of slides showing assets around the world. First, okay, let's start with this from again geared toward Microsoft, but some critics would say when you talk about digital capital being economically and technically superior, no tax. I mean, that doesn't mean it can't be taxed in certain jurisdictions at some point. No torts. Legal issues are going to come up. No regulator. I mean, these are great points, but are they forever points?
The point is, I got $100 million in New York City and I buy a building. I got to worry about someone slipping and falling on the sidewalk and a property tax. But if I can snap my fingers and teleport the building to Zambia, Central Africa, or to Monaco, all of a sudden it's a teleportable building. And of course, if I don't have any tenants in the building, I don't got to worry about them defaulting.
Right,
so. Right. Digital capital is the ability to move the money at the speed of light anywhere on Earth and program it on a computer. There's a lot of people that are going to want that rather than having, pick a country in Africa where you want to invest your life savings in a building.
Right.
Forever.
Yeah, let's say Angola.
Right. And what happens if the government fails? You lose everything.
Exactly.
But if you could put the building in your pocket and go to the place where you like the government, maybe you get to keep your money.
Great. Let's talk about how it's going to grow. So in your presentation, you have this slide twice. The first one, right now, Bitcoin is $2 trillion. You're saying in 21 years, $280 trillion. How do we get there?
What I'm saying is the wealth in the entire world is growing because of innovation, because of technology, but also because of inflation. And people are thinking to sell their Central African real estate to buy Bitcoin, or sell their Siberian natural gas to buy Bitcoin, or sell their Argentine currency to buy Bitcoin. So as people migrate their capital into this global monetary asset, that asset class is going to grow faster
than the rest
than equity, faster than gold, faster than real estate.
But also, did I read somewhere that you're saying each Bitcoin would be worth the equivalent of $13 million?
Yeah, well, when you crank in the growth rate, which for me, the base case is 29% a year on average for 21 years, that gets you from where we are today to 13 million a coin in the year 2045.
All right, so we've talked about the financial parts of this. You and I have had great conversations in the past about the humanitarian part of this, right? And I want to talk about that. You just mentioned Africa, for instance. Bitcoin's philosophy and political promise. This is an article from 2022. It's not just a decentralized peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It's more, right? This is what this article is saying. And it's going to have an impact on economies, philosophy, politics, human rights, and society. That is huge to live up to.
Bitcoin is a protocol for prosperity. Fire, electricity, steel, English, mathematics. You would give them to the world. Bitcoin is an economic protocol. Once you master Bitcoin, you can figure out how to save your wealth, how to economically prosper. It works for a country, a company, a family, an individual. Nobody owns it. It's a utilitarian, egalitarian entitlement, just a good for the world. That's why I'm so enthusiastic about it.
And particularly underdeveloped nations, right? I mean, this is what we're really talking about, a way for them to catch up. I mean, right now, if you're an underdeveloped nation and you want to try to catch up, you're at the whims or the mercy of the IMF or the World Bank, who, quite frankly, they have rates sometimes that are like, that makes the mafia blush, right? I mean, to me, you're always going to be an underdeveloped nation if you have to go to the World Bank to borrow money.
If you're a type 1 diabetic, you can eat continuously and you'll starve to death because you cannot store organic energy. If you don't have a capital asset like Bitcoin, I can send billions or tens of billions of dollars to Africa. You can make billions. The money will just drain out of your capital structure because you're storing it in a currency which is collapsing faster than you can actually generate it.
Will countries, will large industrialized countries allow this to live up to its promise? It's one thing to say it's a $2 trillion asset. It's another to say, hey, eventually this will replace fiat currency, which a lot of folks believe it will.
I think you've got to keep in mind money bifurcates into currency, the medium of exchange, of which the dollar is the world reserve currency, and capital, the store of value, of which right now real estate and equity portfolios are the world reserve capital. Bitcoin is emerging to compete with equity and real estate as world reserve capital. But those Africans, they can't buy real estate in the US. They can't buy equity in the New York Stock Exchange. It's global capital. And once you understand that, you realize that every nation that respects property rights is going to support Bitcoin.
Yeah.
If you go communist, full-on socialist, North Korea, Cuba, they're going to expropriate your property. But any place where people respect property rights and they give you a chance for capitalism and freedom, they're going to allow you to have Bitcoin. And the competitor really is, the Vanguard 500 is going to get demonetized a little bit. And then instead of buying a real estate portfolio and a third apartment, you buy some Bitcoin. And I don't think that's threatening to anybody.
Wow. Well, the Trump administration, no, because they're talking about a strategic reserve. But, you know, again, these nations that are in trouble, maybe. I do want to point out, I always talk to people about this, like Yap Stone money. You know, a lot of folks don't realize, you know, it was worth something, in part because it was so dangerous to go to other islands to get it, to bring it back home and to manufacture it. So there is a certain inherent wealth. All right, the third part of this, I got to talk about your saga because you are such an amazing story. This right here, the headline from the New York Daily News in March of 2000, lost $6 billion in a day. Hotshot tech CEO loses his fortune. I mean, they blamed you for this massive crash in the stock. How did you deal with this then and stay focused to get to where you are right now?
It's very humbling. It reminds you sometimes that you need a good team and you can't do too much too fast. I wish I'd had Bitcoin back then. My life would have been a lot easier. I think having lived through all the difficulties of my 30 years in business, when I got to the point where I saw Bitcoin, I realized the elegance of
Did you have a eureka moment
when
you put it all together? Was there like a eureka moment? You ran out of the house with a bath towel on, like, I figured it out.
Yeah, it's everybody working themselves to death as hard as they can, and they can't get ahead.
Yeah.
And that's because you're trying to do too much, but you don't have the right savings technology. And so Bitcoin was that way out of that working myself to death.
Of course, you still have detractors now. Give me an example. I'm sure you know Jim Chanos, for instance. Of course, famous hedge fund manager known for shorting companies. He shorted Enron. This is just a recent tweet where he went after you. Now, part of this probably is because you crushed him. I mean, let's face it, he was short your stock for a long time, and I'm sure he's gotten hammered. But there are other people out there that are saying this whole thing, again, getting a little bit back to what we were talking about earlier, is just sort of a P.T. Barnum act. What do you say to the folks on the street that still don't get it?
Well, I think there are a lot of successful, well-known people that just don't understand digital capital. I mean, there were successful people running Kodak. There's successful people running Xerox, and there are successful people that didn't care for the automobile or electricity. I think another decade and they'll start to appreciate it. But right now, you're going to have a lot of rich, famous people that are skeptical until they put in the 100 hours to learn about Bitcoin.
I was just telling my team, I read an article recently that 20 years after the invention of the automobile, there was a movement to get rid of it. They said, we tried it, it didn't work, it's slow, it's not as reliable as a horse and buggy. So to your point, maybe it takes some time. I can't let you go without talking about the future after you pass away, because you've talked about establishing a sort of mission, a charity to support Bitcoin and the adoption of Bitcoin forever. What does that look like in your mind?
Well, you know, I'm reminded of the fact that Rockefeller contributed a lot of money to a lot of causes, and 100 years after his death, people are criticizing him for something that one of his charities is doing right now. So sometimes you got to be careful about big charity. But what I would say about Bitcoin, which is just wonderful, is if you accumulate a lot of wealth in Bitcoin and you just burn the keys when you leave, you're making a pro rata contribution to everybody that owns Bitcoin in the world based upon their contribution and their knowledge of Bitcoin. So I think that supporting Bitcoin as a protocol for prosperity is just a great thing to do. And otherwise, I think, you know, take the Bitcoin with you.
Yeah. Will you be known more for the economic success or the humanitarian success?
I hope I'm known for having taken the torch from Satoshi and went on to commercialize Bitcoin with corporations and governments decades after he passed.
All right. Let's remember what happened to Prometheus. Let's hope that doesn't happen to you as you try to pass the torch on. Michael, great stuff. Congratulations.
Thank you, Charles.
Great stuff.
Those who are here committing crimes, robberies, shooting at police officers, raping innocent people, have been a harm to our country, well, cancel me, because I'm going to protect the people of this city.
Let's start with cutting off illegals, getting free everything. Free housing, free schooling, free food. The police detail you had, the 200 police detail you had, let's start with that. Because you Democrats, and you remember you told us to defund the police? Remember, you ran on that. Remember, y'all know for real. And now, if you all vote on anything to raise all taxes or anything, because we are already suffering, homeowners, you all will not be in those seats.
Okay, first you heard from New York City Mayor Adams in a major shift. He says, deport criminal illegal aliens now. And also that was Chicago resident Danielle Carter-Walters describing how dangerous the situation is now in Chicago. Danielle joins us now. Danielle, we appreciate you so much for joining us on the show. Merry Christmas to you. I know it's so hard for you guys in Chicago. Can you please tell the viewer about what exactly is happening on the streets in Chicago now when it comes to illegal aliens?
Well, we have about 70,000 illegal aliens here in Chicago. They're just having entire restaurants all on the corner of residential areas. We're having crime. We're having more shoplifting going on here. And we also having where the gangs are taking over. So it's really bad here in Chicago, especially when you dump 70,000 illegal aliens in our neighborhoods.
You know, Danielle, so on Monday, a mass shooting in Chicago, reportedly involving, migrants from Venezuela, 8 shot, 3 dead. And now,
yes.
Chicago, is this right that Chicago spent nearly $600 million in illegal aliens since 2022, but the Democrat mayor and the city council, they want to raise your property taxes to pay for it when you guys are getting nothing in return? We're showing the amount nationwide. It was $574 million, now we're hearing from Chicago, spent on this. Nationwide, $150 billion plus spent nationwide on illegal aliens. Is that true? Is those the numbers you guys are hearing about too?
Yes, we are in $1 billion deficit. We have spent, and I believe it's more, $600 million on illegals, funding them free housing, free medical, free schooling, free food, everything free, all while trying to tax the taxpayers. So we are in the billion-dollar deficit. We want Brandon Johnson to allow Trump to come in and do his job. That's what we voted for, and that's what we want as American citizens and as Chicago citizens. I did not vote for this mayor, nor have I voted Democrat since 2016. But since this is what we have to deal with, he's a dictator. He refused to listen to the citizens, and we're telling him right now, if you do not listen to us and let Tom Homan come in and get these illegals out of our neighborhood, that it's going to be a problem.
You know, Danielle, we got news coming in. Mexico troops just seized a record amount of fentanyl, an historic amount that was heading toward the border. Let's take a listen to New York City Mayor Eric Adams on what the money that's going toward illegal aliens, what it's not being spent on for taxpayers. Danielle, let's get your reaction to this. Watch.
Okay.
The long-term impact of that $6.4 billion has not materialized yet. We could have spent $400 million on community schools to handle chronic absentees. We could have spent $600 million on 2,000 guidance counselors and social workers in schools, $39 million on summer rise and extended hours for 30,000 children, $22 million on MetroCards for 75,000 summer youth employment participants. $200 million could have gone to 1,000 more police officers. $84 million could have gone to 730 park staffs. The police budget is less than what we spent. The entire NYPD is only $6.2 billion. Fire department only $2.6 billion. They hurt the future of New York City.
A word on that.
Well, first, I think he's too late. He's definitely too late. He should have did this when it first happened, just like Brandon Johnson should have did this when it first happened. We fought him because we wanted to get put on the ballot so we can vote on if we wanted Chicago to stay a sanctuary city. Brandon Johnson blocked that. So these Democratic mayors, Eric Adams now want to act like he wants to do something, but he should have did something 2 years ago when they started coming.
That's an important point.
So basically, I blame him for what's going on, just like we blame Pritzker and we blame Brandon Johnson, because these Democratic mayors and governors allowed this. And they knew that we didn't have the funding to fund this, but they didn't care because they knew it was going to be on the taxpayer back. So now that we're in this deficit and the New York mayor is going through what he's going through, now he wants to act like he's trying to do something. But the good thing is he's acting like he wants to do something. Our mayor, Brandon Johnson, is doubling down on what he's saying.
Got it. Daniel Carter Walters, thank you so much very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you. We'll be staying on the story. It's good to see you.
Welcome back. President-elect Trump demanding that all hostages held by Hamas be released before his inauguration on January 20th. Trump posted on Truth Social, if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office of President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East. The Israeli Defense Forces confirming American-Israeli hostage Omer Nutra was killed in battle on October 7th. His body has been held hostage in Gaza. Joining me now is Georgia Congressman Richard McCormick, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Armed Services Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. He's also the Republican Study Committee and the GOP Doctors Caucus. Congressman, thanks very much for being here this morning. Give us your reaction now that we know this Israeli American was in fact killed and is dead. His body held hostage by the Hamas terrorists, and now Trump is reacting. Your reaction?
I've been saying this for a long time. When you exude weakness, your enemies will flourish. And this is exactly what's happened. The Biden administration has been the worst foreign policy I've ever seen in the history of the United States. I used to teach this stuff, evolutionary warfare, and I can't stand what I've seen. It's great to have President Trump coming in, actually not just talking softly and carrying a big stick, but actually flexing on something that we've always had in recent history, which is the most lethal military organization in the world. And people should fear us when they do wrong. And they have done us wrong, and they haven't done anything to right this incredible injustice. I'm glad that we're going to have a president who's going to stand up for what's right and get something done for a change.
Yeah, I mean, he's tough, and he's saying so. I'm wondering what the reaction on the other side will be. Do you expect we could actually see a resolution? I mean, do you have any indication that the hostages will be released?
I think they will. As a matter of fact, I think people realize that this is the guy who dropped the mother of all bombs. When he says something, he means it. People should be fearful when you do wrong. That's what the military is for. I don't think the Middle East folks that we've dealt with, whether it be in Afghanistan, Iraq, other places, they understand one thing. They understand strength. And when you exude strength, your enemies will comply. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, what is the budget for the Pentagon? I mean, DOGE co-leaders Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are set to meet with GOP lawmakers this week. Elon is proposing to cut the Pentagon's $824 billion budget after it failed its 7th audit in a row. Elon Musk posted this on X. The government needs to stop wasting your hard-earned money. On the campaign trail, Musk touted the need for DOGE, saying, quote, the interest, just the interest that we owe on our national debt is higher than the defense budget. Over $1 trillion and growing is where this is going. The interest. The country is going to go bankrupt. That's why we need the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, on a brass plaque on a desk, Congressman. Nice tweet from Elon Musk. But what do you make of that? The fact that the interest alone is rivaling the amount of money we spend on defense. Is that the budget, 824?
Well, that's exactly what we've all been talking about. Well, at least the Republicans anyways. The problem with the Democrats is they've never run out of things that they can give away for free, quote unquote. When you talk about $8 trillion in debt payment just on interest alone every year, we can't just talk about the military, though. The military can do some things better. We can save some money just in the way of contract. We can be careful that we don't decrease our abilities because China is right on our heels. However, if you talk about 75% of the budget, 75% is non-discretionary. We're going to have some hard decisions. We got to bring the Democrats in and talk about Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. There's hundreds of billions of dollars to be saved, and we know how to do it. We just have to have the stomach to actually take those challenges on. But we can't just talk about our discretionary budget. That's less than 25% of our budget. We have to have some real hard discussions.
Well, we talk about this all the time. It seems like we're constantly talking about where to cut and the fact that the fight over defense. Do you believe that the defense budget should be cut?
I'm not a big fan of that. I think we could do things a lot better. But when you talk about what's happening in Taiwan, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening with Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, this is an unstable place, an unstable time. We have to be very careful. We have to have a real conversation. When you talk about cutting the budget, I'm all about that. And quite frankly, we need to. But we often argue about the 10% of the leftover budget that's left over when we talk about the 75% of the non-discretionary and the 15% with the military and then 10% of everything else. We haven't had the right discussions at all. Quite frankly, we have a 30% deficit spend, actually over 30% deficit spending per year. If you cut the entire military, that's only 15%. We have to have a realistic conversation about where we're going to make some real changes, free the economy, grow it faster than the inflation, actually produce more tax revenue by doing that. But we have to have some real hard discussions about the 75% of the budget we never talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, Todd Pyro, even though our adversaries are on the march, you've got, obviously, China every day trying to undermine America. You've got Russia, same thing, North Korea, Iran. You still have to question whether or not the $824 billion budget, the defense budget, should be cut, given the fact they keep failing these audits.
Yeah, and I get that. And we need accountability. And we need to talk about contracting. We need to talk about consistency. We need to talk about the future technologies, drones and other things like that. We can never leave out the Marines because we still have to take ground. But really, like I said, I get the whole military budget and how to be accountable. But if you cut the entire military budget, you're still over 15%. in the whole. We have to have a lot of discussions, not just about the military.
Let me bring in Todd Pyro. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Congressman, I understand what you're saying. I just view the plight of the American soldier as something where, why do we have these individuals need food stamps if we have an $800+ billion budget? And I understand that their explanation's always given. It just seems very incongruous to me to have these federal contractors that make money because they can't budget, combined with the fact that the Pentagon itself has these overruns and can't account for money, while our brave men and women are suffering. You know, they're the ones that are signing up to fight and die for our country. If there's going to be an inflated budget, those individuals that are volunteering for that should be the ones that are getting the money. And I understand that that's not necessarily how it works, but I do agree with Maria in the sense that there is an ability to cut. And if there's not, let's make sure that the people doing the fighting are getting the money. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and let me just jump in there and mention COVID and all the spending that happened on after COVID, Congressman. I mean, now we're getting these new details from the House Select Committee on the coronavirus pandemic, releasing a report of more than 500 pages, which detailed the review of the federal pandemic response, which included trillions of dollars in spending. It included the virus most likely originated from the lab in Wuhan, China, and that it could not have been found in nature, something we all knew for months now. The report also finding social distancing and masks were not backed by scientific data, and that the pandemic response caused unemployment to skyrocket, while American kids lost, quote, decades worth of academic progress. Look at what happened as a result of COVID, and was there ever any response to the cover-up of COVID from communist China? No. So again, it brings us back to the defense budget. It brings us back to the response to our adversaries, which has been nothing, a lack of response, no deterrence. Does this change materially when Trump comes in?
I sure hope it does. This is what the DOGE is all about. Matter of fact, when I was on the COVID Select Committee, and we just had the committee hearings 2 weeks ago, and we were talking to disaster relief about where their money went. The fact that they're still spending money on COVID last year, billions and billions of dollars, and that's why they run out of money, because they're spending on the wrong thing. I literally questioned the head of FEMA, why? Why are you still spending on COVID this far into it? It has been a money suck since the beginning. It hasn't been about COVID. It's been about spending on the wrong areas. That's what the DOGE is supposed to be about. It's certainly, like I said, not just about the military. You could cut half the military. That's 7% of your budget. 7%. We're 30% plus over. We have a lot of talking to do. We have a lot of work to do. We're only going to have 2 years guaranteed to get this done. So we have a lot of work to do.
Well, I mean, let's add on to the list all of that forgiveness of student loan debt. All right, how much did that cost? That President Biden was pushing it, it's still pushing it, even as the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. So I know there's a lot of areas to cut. Congressman, we're going to be watching your work. Thanks very much.
Always appreciate you, Maria. Have a great day. Semper Fi.
And to you, Richard McCormick. Lawrence, Edward.
Yeah, Maria, we do have that number. 227,000 jobs were created, beating expectations. Maybe to Charles' point, good news could be good news. We'll have to see. The unemployment rate, 4.2%, is exactly in line with expectations on this. If you look into this, healthcare added 54,000 jobs. Leisure and hospitality added 53,000 jobs in November. Government continued to trend up at 33,000 jobs. That's in line with its average monthly gain over the last 12 months of 41,000 jobs per month over the past 12 months in the government sector. Employment increased 32% in transportation and equipment manufacturing, as well as social assistant edged up by 19,000. Retail trade added 28,000 jobs in this. You know, employment in November, the average hourly earnings, let's go into that, for all employees for non-farm payrolls rose 13 cents or 0.4%. The total change, we look at those revisions in this report, in September was revised up by 32,000 jobs, and in October was revised up by 24,000 jobs. So that downward trend of revisions seems to be turning around. Combined revisions is up for September and October of 56,000 jobs. So we are going to dig into this report. I do want to find the average hourly earnings year over year. It's 4%. That is up from the estimation was 3.9%. It's 4%. The average work week hours was 34.3 3%. That is exactly in line with expectations. Manufacturing added 22,000 jobs, a rebound of what they had been doing. So again, top line number, 227,000 jobs, 4.2%. Government's still adding to this report in this. I'm going to dig a little bit more into this as you guys noodle on what we've got out so far. Maria?
Yes, thank you so much, Ed.
Trump officials are holding high-level talks with Ukraine about a peace deal with Russia. This comes as House Speaker Mike Johnson has denied Biden's request for more aid to Ukraine. Watch this.
I'm not planning to do that. There are developments by the hour in Ukraine. I think, as we predicted, and as I said to all of you weeks before the election, if Donald Trump is elected, it will change the dynamic of the Russia war on Ukraine. And we're seeing that happen. So it is not the place of Joe Biden to make that decision now. We have a newly elected president, and we're going to wait and take the new commander-in-chief's direction on all of that. So I don't expect any Ukraine funding to come up now.
Elbridge Colby is a former Assistant Defense Secretary under Trump, and he joins me now. Elbridge, what would a peace deal, Russia, Ukraine, what would it actually look like?
Well, Stuart, great to be with you. I mean, I certainly don't want to get ahead of the president-elect, who's a consummate deal maker, in exactly what that might look like. But I think you see a lot of pieces moving. People see that Donald Trump is for real. He wants to make peace, but he's also not somebody to be toyed with. We know that from his first term. And I think you've seen that the Ukrainians are coming. They met with his transition team. It was reported Vice President-elect Vance, General Kellogg and others, Congressman Waltz. And there have been signals also from the Russians of an openness to negotiation. So exactly what that looks like, I don't think we know. But I think a key part is going to be the Europeans stepping up, which President Trump has also been on, frankly, for about 40 or 50 years. And you actually see some movement there. The Financial Times reporting today that the EU is considering defense bonds. I mean, marvelous to see that actually the Europeans will actually stand up if a president holds them to account.
I think it's the Trump effect, actually. It's rippling across the world.
Exactly.
Here's another one for you. Trump's Middle East envoy. He's in Qatar and Israel. They're pushing for a Gaza ceasefire before Trump's inauguration. Could there be a ceasefire and hostage release before Trump takes office, January the 20th?
I certainly hope so. Again, we know that President Trump commands respect in terms of his willingness to make threats and follow through on them. For instance, his comments on Truth Social about the hostages, his willingness to back that up. But it's also a very focused and calibrated demand, very reasonable, that Americans care for and was on the campaign trail. The American people voted for that. But we also see the ceasefire in Lebanon, which, again, happened after President Trump was elected. And, of course, Biden and his team want to take credit, but they've been vainly trying to do something about that for over a year, and nothing's come of it. Even the Iranians, Stuart, are getting the memo. There's been reporting that they're interested in sort of trying to accommodate the new Trump administration. So I think we see, again, this winning combination that President Trump brings of strength, but also an interest in peace and a willingness to negotiate in a flexible and pragmatic way. We can't get that soon enough. Jake Sullivan was admitting yesterday that our stockpiles are bare, that if, God forbid, there were a war with China, we'd run out in a hot minute. So they're leaving such a bad situation. I think that's really important for people to understand as they prepare for a much better situation under President Trump. But it's a really bad situation right now.
Well, then we've got France's government has collapsed. The prime minister was ousted in a no-confidence vote. This is political turmoil in France right before Trump gets there this weekend. What's the significance of that? Trump goes to Paris. He's looking like the president of the United States, and he's going to meet with Macron in political crisis. What's in it for us here?
Well, a couple things. I mean, I think the reopening of Notre Dame is kind of a civilizational event. I think all of us feel hopefully an affection and a support for that. And I think it's interesting that President Macron is very critical of President Trump. You see how people actually behave, like Justin Trudeau as well. He invites him to come to the reopening, and I think President Trump is magnanimous and gracious to go. I think the other thing I would say here is, remember Angela Merkel, the former chancellor of Germany, a couple years ago, going to Harvard and prattling on about being audaciously about being the leader of the free world. I think a lot of these people who have gone with these meetings in the G7 with Joe Biden, Trudeau, Macron, Schultz, et cetera, they're getting their comeuppance. You know, the government in France is falling, or is at least failing. The government in Germany has fallen. The government in Canada is on the verge of defeat. The government in Japan has fallen, the Kishida government. And I think there's a real wind at the back of Donald Trump. And there are a lot of people out there, both previously opposed who are changing their spots, but also people like Prime Minister Modi, Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Duda of Poland, who want to work with President Trump.
It's all changed. I've got to get this one in. You are being considered as a replacement nominee for Secretary of Defense, along with Governor DeSantis from Florida. Would you go back to the Trump administration?
Well, I don't know what about those reports. I don't know where they're coming from. What I will say is I make no presumptions, but I'd be very honored to serve in the Trump administration in whatever role I could have a positive impact in implementing President Trump's agenda. I think it's about President Trump's agenda. He's run on America first, on peace through strength. That's the agenda I believe in. It's the agenda the American people have given him an incredibly strong mandate for. So I'd be honored to serve wherever I could be and make a positive contribution.
Elbridge, thank you very much for being on the show today. Always appreciated. Come back soon. Thank you, sir.
In the Department of Government Efficiency could have been born out of my own mind, right? Because, you know, as a federal employee, I've been fighting the bureaucracy for 15 years because nothing was logical. It was all about the process and not about the results. So I hope the administration comes in. I hope that I can help in some way, shape, or form. And I'm optimistic because there are good people. We just need to make sure they're the ones in charge.
All right, so let's bring in the author of the upcoming book, All the President's Money. Great title. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, my second favorite chairman of the Oversight Committee. Look, nobody knows this case better than you. It's hard for me to believe, Chairman, that the Bidens are only going to give a immunity agreement to and let off the hook Hunter Biden. It's going to be a lot broader than that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back to our final report, we issued criminal referrals to the Department of Justice, not just on Hunter Biden, but also on Jim Biden. And I can tell you, Jason, from having Jim Biden's personal checks and his checks in his LLC, the guy's got millions of dollars worth of loans from shady people, loans that when he was under transcribed interview with us, he said he had no loan documentation, he had never paid any interest, never paid any principal. The IRS, as Gary Shapley or Joseph Ziegler, the two great whistleblowers, would tell you, that's income after so many years. When you get a loan and you're not going to pay it back, and it's obvious you're not going to pay it back, that's an income. So he has millions of dollars of taxes he's evaded. He's been in schemes that would make one believe that he was trying to sell pardons or some type of government favor to these shady characters. So the whole Biden family should be under review for Joe Biden right now as he's making those very generous pardons.
Congressman, but and both of the whistleblowers have talked about this at length, that it was Joe Biden's Department of Justice, it was Merrick Garland, and even nameless, faceless individuals there, saboteurs who corrupted the investigation into not just Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden. With President Trump coming in, with Pam Bondi running as Attorney General, how do you kind of cut out that rot and get to the heart of the cover-up and make sure that the House is cleaned and the people who are responsible for the cover-up do pay the price?
I strongly encourage the next Attorney General, Ms. Bondi, to work closely with Shapley and Ziegler, the two IRS whistleblowers, because they know exactly who in the deep state were involved in the cover-up. If you ask me who I hope is held accountable in this, obviously I want to see the Biden family held accountable, but I want to see the deep state actors that were involved in the cover-up. You had four agencies. You had the FBI, the Department of Justice, the IRS, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, all at one point or another had investigations of Biden family members. And every time it got to the top, because why would anyone pay Jim Biden or Hunter Biden a penny? They were paying for access for Joe Biden, who was vice president. And every time it got to Joe Biden, they were told to stand down. Those government employees have abused their trust. They need to be held accountable.
And Chairman, you know, one thing that bothers me that probably needs to get a little bit more attention is that the Bidens, particularly Hunter Biden, had no trouble cashing in on all his misdeeds by writing a book and the supposed Netflix movie that he's coming up with. I thought he flaunted that in front of the committee there in Congress. What do you think about that? The topic of their profiting from this, that was no problem, but now deserves a pardon.
Absolutely. You look at that Netflix documentary, it's being funded by Kevin Morris. Kevin Morris is the one that paid his IRS back taxes. He's the one that paid his legal fees for Abby Lowell to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. We believe over $8 million. And I mean, where's the accountability here? He's profiting off every aspect of Joe Biden's public service, and he's profiting in the worst possible way. So look, I hope that the new Department of Justice and the Trump administration takes this seriously. I hope that they say we're going to hold people accountable for bad behavior. It starts at the top with the Bidens, but it's not just the Bidens. It's the deep state actors, Jason. You know the deep state as well as anyone, and they need to be held accountable because there is a two-tier system of justice in America. And the American people saw that, and they voted to change that when they voted for Donald Trump.
Before we move on to one more thing, you just hit on something incredibly important. 2014, 2016, time barred, statute of limitations has run out. So why would other people in the Biden familia or in the circle need pardons? Well, because maybe it's an ongoing conspiracy that's run well past 2016, but I digress. But moving on to this, you, Oversight Committee, will hold a hearing on the census, how it miscounted to benefit blue states and actually hurt red states, Congressman.
Yeah. So the census was taken during COVID. Obviously, there weren't many federal employees that needed an excuse not to go to work. The census workers would be at the top of that list. We know the census people would go and knock on doors for people. They've done that for a long time, decades, if someone didn't fill out the census forms. But they didn't do that last census. And what it appears happened, they just estimated the populations. And guess what? They underestimated Republican states and overestimated the population of Democrat states. And as a result, that probably cost Republicans as many as 4 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Because
isn't that amazing how it always seems to fall that direction? It's also that directs where the federal funds go. Congressman Comer, Chairman, thanks for joining us on The Bottom Line.
Thank you all.
Welcome back. President-elect Donald Trump's lawyers are citing Hunter Biden's pardon to dismiss Trump's New York hush money case. Trump's lawyers say that Biden's claim that cases against Hunter were infected by raw politics echo the president-elect's argument that the charges brought against Trump by the Manhattan DA's office were also politically motivated. Joining us now is Trump-Vance transition senior advisor Jason Miller. Jason, great to see you.
Morning.
Thank you so much for being here. So walk us through this. I mean, obviously, much of the charges against President Trump have gone away, but this hush money case, his lawyers want that to go away now as well after Hunter Biden was pardoned.
As it should, Maria. All of these cases were politically motivated, and the American public saw right through it. They saw that this was the weaponization of our legal system against President Trump. By the way, we've never seen something like this in American history. President Trump did nothing wrong. I think that was very clearly stated, very clearly made. And so it's right for the president's attorneys to follow up and say this should go away.
And it's incredible to me that there are so many Democrat governors and still, haters out there who are still promising to resist President Trump's agenda.
Well, I think some of the folks, they can just never be helped. But what I would caution them on is the fact that President Trump won the popular vote in this election. He put up record numbers in states that traditionally are viewed as blue states. The amount of support that President Trump has from blue cities, blue states, I would really caution some of these governors to pause and think about that, because while President Trump's trying to make the economy and secure the border better for everybody, they shouldn't be fighting against that.
So let's talk about the agenda and some of these nominations. President Trump's pick to run the Drug Enforcement Administration, Hillsborough County, Florida Sheriff Chad Kushner withdrew his name from consideration last night after receiving criticism over his COVID policies. The Wall Street Journal also reporting that Trump is now considering replacing nominee for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis served as a Navy lawyer in Iraq and the Guantanamo Bay detention facility and was on an earlier short list of potential Defense Secretary candidates. Trump's cabinet nominees, including Hegseth, have been making the rounds on Capitol Hill. Trump's pick to run the Treasury. Scott Bessent reportedly will meet with Republican senators today. Pam Bondi and Linda McMahon holding meetings this week as well with senators. Meanwhile, DOJ co-leaders Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy set to speak with GOP lawmakers on Capitol Hill tomorrow to talk about cutting costs. Talk to us about the Trump-Vance transition and your expectations for Senate confirmations.
Well, I love these picks that the president has put forward, and especially when you look at where we are in 2024 versus 2016, President Trump is so far ahead of the curve, and especially when think about the economic folks that he's put in. You have Scott Bessent at Treasury, Howard Lutnick at Commerce, even inside the West Wing, we have Kevin Hassett at NEC, and then Jameson Greer across the street at USTR. These folks are powerhouses. These are the people that are going to get the economy back on track, do something about the Biden inflation that we've been dealing with over the past 4 years. And with the cabinet that the president is putting forward, I think it's really notable just how talented and qualified they are. We've never had an incoming administration like this ready to hit the ground running. In fact, you look at the way foreign leaders are coming to visit President Trump, the way that everybody is taking note of him essentially resuming the presidency. He's ready to go on day one. We talk about the executive orders will be put in place with regard to securing the border and, of course, drill, baby, drill. He's ready. This team is ready. We've never seen anything like it.
Is he seriously considering replacing Pete Hegseth with Ron DeSantis?
Well, as you know, Maria, and I've probably said this to you 100 times, until we hear it from President Trump, then it's all just chatter. Here's the important point, though. It's going to be President Trump that's picking the next DOD secretary, not Kamala Harris. So it's going to be somebody who's going to respect our country, respect our military, make sure that we keep our country and our people safe, but not be the world cops going all around trying to get involved everywhere, as opposed to Kamala Harris, who'd put some DEI-loving woke general in charge of the DOD, which we don't want.
Fair point. I got to get your take on the agenda, though, Jason. When I saw President Trump over the weekend, and when I was talking with President, Lindsey Graham came over as well. He was there, and he told me that he is going to focus first on the border, then on then on eliminating the green policies and drill, baby, drill, and tapping into our energy capacity, and then tax cuts later. I mean, look, you're right. President Trump won the popular vote. He, won all the swing states, and this was a decisive victory. People voted for the extension of those tax cuts. Why are we waiting until the end of next year to get that through reconciliation? Do you think people are going to be disappointed by that?
I think there's going to be a lot more quicker movement with regard to that. Now, some of the things, of course, are executive orders. When we talk about the border, you talk about energy exploration, knocking off this Green New Scam nonsense. But keep in mind that with the tax cuts, we had a lot of new promises that were made on the campaign trail that we have to incorporate in. Especially when you're talking about something like the tax code, there's a process that goes through on Capitol Hill. It's not an executive order. And with all the different new things that are coming forward, plus re-upping the tax cuts we had before, we're going to not only keep the tax cuts from 2017, we're going to make sure we bring down everybody's taxes. That's going to be the net result, but you have to work with Congress on that. That's just the way it works.
This is a fair point. That's a great answer there. All right, I got to get your take on Mark Zuckerberg. Meta's president of global affairs said earlier this week that the company's CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, is seeking, quote unquote, an active role in shaping technology policy with the incoming Trump administration. This after Zuckerberg reportedly met with Trump for the Thanksgiving Eve dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Jason, look, a lot of people are still mad at this guy because he censored so much information over COVID, working with 1,000 people in government, according to the Twitter files, working with them to censor information that the American people wanted to talk about and learn about during COVID. And now, is he going to get an active role in developing tech policy with President Trump?
So two things can be true at the same time here. We know from President Trump and the way he governed in his first term that he likes to build a broad coalition, bring people together, even if they've been against him in the past. He never forgets. And I would just remind people of that. We talk about the censorship that we've seen in the past. Obviously, we had the drop boxes in 2020 and all of that nonsense. So President Trump will build those coalitions, but I would just caution people that President Trump has a long memory.
Okay. Good point, because I know President Trump was also upset that there was so much censorship going on. But to hear from Mark Zuckerberg that he wants an active role, what might that look like? I mean, Elon Musk has obviously been a great influence for President Trump. What does President Trump want to do with regard to shaping tech policy?
Well, and by the way, it's not just Zuckerberg. You see all the CEOs that are coming to Mar-a-Lago, again, referencing the foreign leaders that are coming in. everybody wants to be a part of this administration because they know that it's going to take off like a rocket ship. And so with regard to Zuckerberg, I wouldn't go necessarily define a role like that, but we know the president doesn't necessarily have to have committees or people inside the building. He's on the phone. He's going to call CEOs and tech leaders and business leaders and foreign leaders directly. That's why he's able to get things done so quick, because he knows how to cut through the nonsense and the staff and all the noise and just go right to the source. So if we can get some support and cooperation from whether it be Zuckerberg or any other CEO that's previously not supported the president, then great, let's bring them all on board. But again, there's the one person who's making those decisions. That's President Trump.
All right, we will leave it there. Jason, it's great to see you.
Hey, thank you.
We'll be watching your work. Thanks so much. Jason Miller here.
All right, now more than ever, I'll tell you, we need Kash Patel to clean out this FBI stable of corruption, and that's the subject of the riff. So it's no surprise that Joe Biden lied to us about pardoning his son Hunter, because Biden has lied throughout his presidency on COVID, on inflation, budget deficits, Afghanistan, the border crisis, Trump tax cuts, the Hunter Biden laptop. Remember that? So here he goes again, on his way out the door, with a particularly mendacious lie about a breathtakingly large-scoped pardon for son Hunter. But here's the key as I see it. Incredibly broad scale of this pardon from 2014 through 2024 is really tantamount to an admission of guilt by Hunter Biden and by Joe Biden to all of the influence peddling that financed the Biden family crime syndicate. And the fact that the Biden Justice Department tried its hardest to defend Hunter, and the fact that the Biden Justice Department tried to put Donald Trump in jail for 750 years with all their weaponized lawfare attack that never had any merit at all this shows why it is essential to clean up the Justice Department and the FBI. Now, bring on stage Kash Patel, who President Trump is nominating for FBI director. Kash Patel is Mr. Cleanup. He's a brilliant guy, vast experience in law, national security, and fighting crime. He'll come into the FBI not to take revenge or wage some kind of new weaponization, but instead to cleanse the agency, to clear out all of the dead wood. Because right now, the FBI is caught in the throes of its greatest corruption scandal since J. Edgar Hoover. And this must be stopped. It must be ended. And the President Trump knows this. He knows it well. And Kash Patel is exactly the guy to do it. Now, take a listen to this tape from our show, 2 weeks ago. Take a listen, please.
The worst weapon we have in government is a two-tier system of justice that's been weaponized. And I think it's time that Donald Trump came in there with the sweeping mandate that the American public gave him to return a singular system of constitutional justice. Here's the thing. There is no revenge list. If Donald Trump is successful, he will make these institutions, the FBI, DOJ, DOD, et cetera, successful forever.
Hear that, importantly, okay? Hear that, no revenge. Kash Patel famously uncovered the Russia hoax that was financed by Hillary Clinton, right? Supported by the FBI and cooked up by their crooked mouthpiece, Christopher Steele. Remember all that? Kash Patel has served as senior director for counterterrorism at the National Security Council. He's been a deputy director of national intelligence. He's been a chief of staff at the Defense Department. He has tried over 60 jury trials. He has been both a prosecutor and a public defender. So he knows all about domestic and international crime, and that's exactly what the FBI needs. And Kash Patel will work closely with Pam Bondi, the brilliant woman and former Florida Attorney General, who will become President Trump's Attorney General running the Justice Department, and she will work hand in glove with Kash and other new officials to clean out the dirty stables of justice that has regrettably prevailed in this country for the past 4 years, if not longer. America wants and needs a fair, neutral, and impartial administration of justice that conforms with the Founding Fathers and the Constitution that they wrote. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and let's include John Ratcliffe over at the CIA, they are going to show that a successful administration of law and security will, to coin a phrase, make America great again. And that is the riff.